Alright, so we are quickly wrapping up the Revolutionary era here, talking about the Southern phase and the end of the Revolutionary War. The Southern phase, we just call that just because the attention from the British started turning towards the states like North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, Virginia, instead of New York and Massachusetts. The reason that they started moving south, the British did, is because there were too many patriots in the north. We know that Boston and especially the New England area was just full of opposition, and General Burgoyne's experience in Saratoga, and General Howe's experience in Philadelphia, and General Clinton at the Battle of Monmouth, they're just facing more and more frustration as they try to fight in the north. They weren't making any ground. They knew that if they moved to the south, maybe started working their way north from Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, um, they probably could get some momentum because in the South there was more loyalist support. They were closer to the West Indies, which was a colonial or colony of theirs as well. And they didn't think they would face as much opposition. As well, they thought they could get support from slaves in the South. They had started offering slaves their freedom if they agreed to fight on the British side. This was a tactic that sort of worked. Many slaves did go to fight with the British, and the Americans, General Washington, was kind of behind the eight ball in this because the Continental Army or the Continental Congress couldn't agree on how they should treat slaves. Although Washington wanted to say, yes, let's let these people fight with us, and yeah, we'll promise them their freedom. There were many people within the Continental Congress who disagreed with that, who didn't want to see slaves gain their freedom. So this was something the British thought they could gain an advantage by doing. Now, the person in charge of the southern phase of the Revolutionary War for the British was Sir Henry Clinton. He was assigned to go down to Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and begin to basically conquer these different colonies and to turn them over to British control. And so that's kind of what he does here. We start with the most southern battle there. If you guys look at the very bottom, it says Battle of Savannah, December of 1778. Um, this is a battle between an attacking British army on the Americans who are living there, and it's a successful one. They're dominated, and the British are quickly able to take over the colony of Georgia. The next significant battle that we'll talk about is the Battle of Charleston, which happens about 2 years later, where again the British attack. They're able to take over the city of Charleston, and then later that year, in August, at the Battle of Camden, just a little bit north of Charleston, they're able to also claim victory. And in both of these, the Americans experience heavy losses. They lose thousands of men that either are killed or captured, and the British are kind of steamrolling the Americans, just like in New York when the war very first started. It's very much like that. The British are a superior fighting force. There's more of them, and they're quickly taking over two of the states of now what's known as the United States. So Georgia and South Carolina at this point, after the Battle of Camden, Battle of Charleston, Battle of Savannah, these two states are in the control of the British. Now at this point, General Henry Clinton is feeling very confident. He goes back up to New York, and he leaves General Charles Cornwallis to basically run the war from that point on, to sort of finish the job off. We've seen this happen before. The British have kind of passed off that power, and that very rarely works. It didn't work when General Howe left General Rahl to fight Washington, and I think we all know how this war ends. General Cornwallis, although had a superior fighting force, still is not able to claim victory against the Americans. Now, at the end of 1780, the tide of the war begins to turn just a little bit. And this begins to happen with the betrayal of Benedict Arnold. What his plan is, he didn't feel like after the Battle of Saratoga, where he helped the Americans defeat General Burgoyne, he didn't feel like George Washington appreciated him enough. He didn't get a promotion. He wasn't recognized. Didn't get any medals. That he thought he deserved. And Benedict Arnold just didn't feel appreciated. Very simple. And his plan, or his promotion at this point in 1780, George Washington was going to appoint him to this place called West Point, which is where the University Army is today. He was going to appoint him to West Point as sort of the boss there. It's on the Hudson River. It's a military outpost, and he was going to be the guy that ran it. But Benedict Arnold saw this as an opportunity, although he appreciated it to some extent. He saw this as an opportunity to betray his country and to finally get appreciated by somebody. And so what he does is contacts people in the British military. One of those is John Andre here, and the plan is to turn control once Benedict Arnold is in charge of West Point. He's going to turn control over to the British. And John Andre here is sort of a co-conspirator, someone that's like the messenger between Benedict Arnold and the higher-ups in the British military. This is eventually sniffed out. The Americans find out about it. John Andre here is eventually executed, and Benedict Arnold is able to escape, and he finds himself a position in the British military. It's one of the more famous acts of betrayal in American history, but is thwarted and prevented from happening. And that happens in 1780, so that's sort of, again, a little bit of a positive for the Americans. And then also in 1780 is the Battle of Kings Mountain, which is right on the North Carolina-South Carolina border there. And this is a victory of just farmer militiamen who are protecting their land from the invading British. And when they see the British, they have a surprise attack and are able to defeat the British. So this is a real quick victory that kind of gets overlooked sometimes, but is very important for building that momentum, building morale amongst the Americans in the South. And then also in 1780, the Dutch end up entering the war as well. The Dutch declare war on the British, and by declaring war on the British, it forces them to sort of refocus their efforts. Now they're going to not only fight the Americans and the French in the colonies, but they're also going to have to fight the Dutch on the high seas and in Europe. And so the British now are fighting three enemies as opposed to just the Americans. And so by the end of 1780, things are starting to shift, and people like Washington and the leaders of the Continental Army and Congress are starting to sense that. General Washington is very active in the South as well, but he appoints General Nathaniel Greene on the left there to also head a small band of an army, and his job is to basically just bother the heck out of the British. His main task is not to enter into a full-scale battle, but to continue to perform guerrilla warfare. Nathaniel Greene here ends up teaming up with the guy on the right, who's General Francis Marion. His nickname was Swamp Fox, because him and his small militia, they weren't really associated with the Continental Army at first. They are the small group of militiamen who are preventing the British from moving any further inland, performing these guerrilla attacks, much like Daniel Morgan, who we talked about earlier, and they're very successful as a very small group. Well, these two end up teaming up and are very successful in preventing the British from taking complete control of the South. Like we said, they enter into guerrilla warfare where they're sneak attacks, they're using sharpshooters, they're on the run, they're not really found, they attack usually at night, and the whole goal of this is to avoid toe-to-toe, face-to-face warfare, because if that happens, the British will win, and so the Americans want to make sure they prevent that from happening. Now, one of the areas that these two sides do fight in sort of this total war fashion, where they are toe to toe, is the Battle of Guilford Courthouse, and this battle goes on for a very long time. It's not a short battle like Battle of Bunker Hill was, or the Battle of Lexington and Concord, where it's just a few hours. I mean, it's a day-long battle, and what you have at the Battle of Guilford Courthouse is a British victory. The British have won once again, but in doing so, in winning, they lose 25% of their force. They defeat the Americans, a much smaller force, but again, in the process of it, they're losing so many men. And this is a very frustrating thing for the leaders, for General Charles Cornwallis, because what he realizes is we're going to fight all these battles and we're going to just destroy the Americans in a lot of these battles, but they're also going to kill a lot of us. And then also there seems to be more of them all the time. And they're going to continue to fight this way, and we're not really going to get anywhere. And so General Cornwallis sees this as sort of, I don't know, the writing on the wall that the British cannot win in the South in the condition that they are. So his plan is to go to the city of Yorktown, which is in there in the upper right along the Chesapeake Bay in Virginia, and to sort of regroup at Yorktown. And once the Americans sort of get wind of all this, they begin to set a trap. You have Admiral de Grasse here on the left, who is leading a fleet of 29 Navy ships from France, along with 3,000 French soldiers, who's coming in along the Chesapeake Bay here. You have George Washington, who also has a large army behind him, and then another French general, Rochambeau, who is also leading a very similarly sized band of military men. And we see in our map here how this sort of shakes out. The red in the middle is the British getting to Yorktown, again, regrouping. Some of them cross over to Gloucester Point there in the north, but they're all set up there. Well, when they get to Yorktown, the French warships led by Admiral de Grasse are pulling into the Chesapeake Bay and travel up the York River to Yorktown. So they're surrounded on the north and the east. And then Washington and his men, almost 9,000 of them, he's leading his soldiers up from the south. And then from the west, you have General Rochambeau with another almost 8,000 soldiers. And so quickly the British are surrounded. The remaining British forces in the south are surrounded by these three men. Okay, and what ends up happening is, as they're surrounded, they move closer and closer, and then they just begin to bomb the heck out of Yorktown. They start firing cannons and artillery into Yorktown, and this lasts for about 2 weeks. And then finally, on October 19th of 1781, realizing that he no longer can win this war, General Charles Cornwallis surrenders. And the men of the French army on the left and the Americans on the right there line a country road on both sides. And the British military, the ceremony of surrender is that they lay down their arms and they march between these two victorious forces. And so again, October 19th, 1781, an important day where the British surrender at Yorktown. The revolution then the fighting is over, and George Washington and the Continental Army are successful and victorious, like I said. So, all right, well, that's pretty much it. You guys have learned an enormous amount of stuff here. We're going to just try to review the heck out of all this. And next Friday, you guys will have your Revolutionary Era test. So let's try to prepare as best we can. Make sure you're asking good questions. And let me know if you have any questions about this assignment. All right, have a great day.